Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Today's episode, Cassavetes, Smith, Burns, a study in attitude. My name is Glenn Gers, and I am the Chief Operating Everything at Writing for Screens, a YouTube channel that I have created in order to pass on some of the skills and tools and insights that I had to figure out for myself in a 25-year career writing for TV and movies. On my way out of the business, I am trying to put these in a form that might be useful to the rest of you as you try and figure out this stuff for yourself. There is no system, there is no rule. Every single artist must figure out their own way of doing things, their own style, their own goals. Every artist must make their own path. All that the rest of us can do is give you some examples of things that we figured out and see if it's useful to you. You still have to try it out for yourself and say, that works for me, or oh my gosh, that I'll never do that again. In order to make this helpful to you, I've tried to boil these down to very small, specific thoughts, ideas, skills, tools. They are here this is a page grab of the main channel page for Writing for Screens on YouTube. If you scroll down there, you'll see that at the bottom there are some playlists. This is a close-up of the first 3 playlists. They are Screenwriting Essentials, Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and The Process, Being a Writer. These 3 playlists together make up about 50 short videos. Each one's about 10 minutes long. Each one is on a very specific topic. Dramatic action, genre, flashbacks, dialogue, character. Whatever it is, it'll be right there in the title, and even better, right there in the thumbnail. You can just look at those brightly colored words and say, oh, I want to find out what he has to say about flashbacks. Just click on that. 10 minutes of that is where the most important stuff on this channel, the best things I have to say, worked over for months and years and then turned into these short videos available to you 24/7 for free. Please check them out. Anything that I have to tell you is probably there already. Once I finished doing those videos, I wanted to try to keep connecting with the audience. So I've decided to do live broadcasts, live streams every Wednesday if I can make it at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Zone. And that is what we are doing today. Every week there's a different topic on those. This time I am talking about 3 independent filmmakers who I think have an interesting common attitude, a different kind of approach that's really interesting to me, even though I cannot honestly recommend their movies to you. And that's what I thought was interesting. I want to talk a little bit about them. First going to say some quick hellos. Hello, Fung. Hello, Blaine. Hello, Michael. Good to see all of you. Okay, so let's get right to it. Some of this stuff is stuff that I think will be very useful. It's the main thing about these 3 filmmakers is that they all had the opportunity to go more mainstream, and they decided not to. And that's what I really think is very cool. Roberta, sorry, I'm not going to do questions right now. Certainly not about politics right now. Let me take care of my main topic, and then I will get back to that. Hello, Doreen. Good to see you. Hello, Roberta. Good to see you. Okay, so we are talking about John Cassavetes, Kevin Smith, and Edward Burns. These are the 3 filmmakers who I want to talk about. I'm not going to do an in-depth critique or study of their careers or their work. What I'm basically trying to give you is some insight into an attitude that they all have, an approach, which I find incredibly inspiring. I don't actually enjoy most of their work. I have a very hard time. I honestly have a very hard time watching a Cassavetes film all the way through. Likewise, Edward Burns and Kevin Smith, I happen to like a little more, but still, I recognize that honestly, most people are going to have a hard time watching these things. That's actually kind of what I find fascinating. And to me, what that does is if I see something that's artistically interesting and yet I don't like it, it's kind of the most inspiring thing to me because I can just pull the tool from that work without worrying that I'm imitating it or derivative or inspired in any way except by the fact that they're using this fascinating approach, this fascinating tool. And my question becomes, what would I do with that? Because I don't think that what they did by that is the most satisfying stuff. Hello, Anthony. Good to see you. Germany Football Rock says, I never heard of all three of them. That is fascinating, and that is why I am doing that. Where can you watch them? Go on the internet. And I will talk a little bit about some of their films. And you can look for those. They are, I believe, almost all streaming. The ones that aren't, I'll talk about how you can see them. You definitely should know about these three. First of all, you should definitely know about John Cassavetes. But the thing I just want to talk about here before is that they are among the early wave of American independent film. John Cassavetes is widely considered to be the originator of American independent film in the 1960s and 70s. Burns and Smith both came after in the late 80s, early 90s. Actually, I think they were both in the 90s. What I want to talk about is the fact that there were many other very powerful, successful, fabulous independent filmmakers from this era. Spike Lee, Steven Soderbergh, Robert Rodriguez, Quentin Tarantino, the Coen brothers, the Hudlin brothers, Robert Townsend, Jim Jarmusch, John Sayles, John Waters, all of them fabulous filmmakers. What is interesting is that most of those then used their indie breakthrough to get into the business. They tried to maintain an indie attitude while they were mainstream. Coen brothers, Soderbergh, Rodriguez particularly, Spike Lee often would take a very indie approach to a lot of his work. Jim Jarmusch, John Sayles, and John Waters never really fully went mainstream, but what they did was there was a mainstream independent filmmaking that developed in the 80s and 90s, and they worked within what I would call the official indie world. What I find fascinating about Cassavetes, Smith, and Burns is that they all had huge breakthroughs. They got the introduction to the mainstream, and very often they tried the mainstream and then they left. They went back to being outsiders, to being way outside, DIY style. And that is the attitude that I wanted to talk about. That is what I find fascinating. Hello, Donna. Okay, so I'm going to talk my little points here, and then I will get to your comments. Let's talk about John Cassavetes first. Let us talk about like I said, he was an actor working in the Broadway in Hollywood in the 1950s. He was very into the method, into realism and authenticity. And he was very frustrated, even when he began to become successful in Hollywood, by the procedures that were keeping him from being what he considered real. He was in Rosemary's Baby, he was in Dirty Dozen, he was in many, many big Hollywood films as an actor. He had his own TV series that he was the star of in the 1950s called Johnny's Staccato. And he was teaching acting classes. During the 1950s, he got frustrated enough that he said, I'm going to make a little indie film in New York with the actors and film people I know, and he was going to make it his way. He actually went on a radio show in New York and said, "Please give me money so that I can make this movie." He got about $20,000. It took him about 2.5 years to make this film. The first film that he did, which was called Shadows, which was about three African American siblings in New York in the late 1950s. It had a jazz score. It was first shown in 1958. And then he took it back. He shot more scenes. He edited it again. He still could not find a distributor. It was too raw. It was too rough. It was too strange. And in fact, it was not commercial. The distributors were not right to reject it. They weren't going to make any money. So in 1960, he took it to the Venice Film Festival, and he won the Critics' Award. So he finally got a distributor in 1961, and the critics went crazy. It was actually quite a success. It broke open the concept that someone could make a film outside of the traditional Hollywood system. And he then went on. It took him several years to make his next one, Faces. He then did Husbands, Minnie and Moskowitz. A Woman Under the Influence is his most famous work, which he did with his wife, the actress Jenna Rollins. He decided to distribute it himself, and it was a huge hit. It was nominated for Academy Awards. He continued to work into the 1980s. One of the things that he always did was he would take time off from his filmmaking, which is what he truly loved, to act in Hollywood TV and movies, so that he could, first of all, support himself and his family, but also so that he could put his money into his films and therefore have backing. He also then, by working in Hollywood films, would become friendly. He had many friends among movie stars, so that as his movies went on, he had bigger stars. Faces and Husbands both had known Hollywood actors working in these very offbeat, improvisational, raw, handmade kind of movies. A Woman Under the Influence, Killing the Chinese Bookies. They all had what were at the time big name movie stars in them. One of the things that was most important to him was improvisation, being authentic and real, even if it was not well crafted. In fact, trying to make it not well crafted, trying to break away from the gloss and slickness and unreality of most performances, most stories, most scenes. He would work things, rework them, try them different ways. He would stop and start the production whenever they could get together. He would get people together to shoot a few scenes, and then he would have to stop, make some more money, go back. His movies are self-indulgent. They are infuriating. They are often boring and incoherent, but they are alive, and they did break through to a new form of filmmaking that was, in America, very, very hard to find. He was the one who said, the camera doesn't require you to have a carefully scripted, brilliantly staged piece. The camera will take in anything, whatever reality there is. So the thing that is keeping our movies in Hollywood from being realistic is the attitude. That is what he brought to the indie film world, and it shook down the walls. It blew the doors open, so that other people in the 1970s and early 80s started to follow that pathway of making something outside of the business, in raw, authentic portrayals of things that were not seen ordinarily on a Hollywood screen, which led to the rise of what is called American independent film, which then fostered the film festivals, especially the Sundance Festival. At the Sundance Festival, Edward Burns and Kevin Smith both broke through with extremely low budget, homemade indie films. Kevin Smith's first film was called Clerks. Edward Burns' first film was called The Brothers McMullen. Hold on. Oh, by the way, about John Cassavetes, if you want to see his films, the Criterion channel often has them, and the Criterion uh, DVD series has a boxed set of 5 of most important John Cassavetes films. Those are easy to get in that way. There are also 2 books about Cassavetes that I've put links to or put the names of in the description. Most of the movies and books and podcasts that I'm talking about, I've listed in the description so that don't have to scribble them down as you're listening to me. So let's talk about Clerks, which was Kevin Smith's first film made for $20,000, $30,000. Smith was inspired by an indie film called Slacker by Richard Linklater, another fabulous indie film, another fabulous indie filmmaker. It was very rough hewn. It was very raw, and it was filmed in Austin, Texas. Apparently, Kevin Smith saw it on his 21st birthday, he says, and he said, I can do that. I can make him. That movie is so raw. It is so handmade that I feel like I can do that. He went to the Vancouver Film School for 4 months and then dropped out. And he said the reason he dropped out was to take the money he was going to use for the rest of film school and use it to pay for a movie instead. While he was at the film school, he met his producer, Scott Mosier, and his director of photography, Dave Klein, who he worked with continuously after that, both of whom worked on Clerks with him. 1994, for $27,000 that he mostly put on his credit card, Kevin Smith was working in order to make the movie. He moved home to New Jersey, and he worked in a local convenience store and video rental store next door. He decided to make his movie about people in that store. He cast people he knew. He asked the owners of the store to let him shoot on weekends or nights when it was closed. There's much written and talked about this film. It's easy to get a lot of backstory on how he made it. It's cool. It's very talky. The acting is amateurish. The shooting is it's black and white, very crude, but very authentic, very alive. And the writing is actually spectacularly interesting for how talky and jokey and obsessive and unique it is. That was Kevin Smith's strength. Is he knew how to write, but most people will not tolerate it. It's way too talky. It's way too jokey. It's way too obsessive, following very weird, often offensive paths, and yet. That is, in fact, its strength. With all of these films, their weaknesses are, in fact, their strengths. He took the film to Sundance in its rawest form. It was picked up by Miramax at the time, and they threw a lot of money at, first of all, the score. They put a lot of rock music on the score. They put a lot of money into promotion. It became a huge hit as an indie. It was still not a big hit as far as Hollywood went, but it made a lot of money for its $27,000 budget. Probably with all the work that Miramax put into it, it's probably $250,000, but it doesn't matter. It made millions. He then went on to make Mallrats, his $2 million studio-backed, throw in the movie star names, do whatever you want, Kevin, movie, which was an entire flop. Shook Kevin Smith up very deeply. What's interesting is later on, people began to say, oh, that's not bad. It's just how he makes movies. It was talky, it was gross, it was immature, and yet weirdly sophisticated. But what happened was Kevin Smith then went backwards. He said, rather than try and make another studio-sized film, he went back to a $250,000 budget, still 10 times his original, and he made Chasing Amy, which is widely considered one of his best. I really like it. It's a cool movie. It may not have aged well. A lot of these things are things I haven't seen recently. But what was interesting was that he got into the mainstream, and he continually tried to be mainstream. He made a film called Cop Out. He made a film called Jersey Girl. He made a series of movies in which he tried to play the big game, and they failed. He was best doing his own thing, and so that's what he went back to. He kept steering himself back to little movies that were his own particular style. He built up his audience. As he often said, no matter what he does, he only hits a certain, for him, he said it was $30 million. His movies, no matter how big or small or good or bad, always made around $30 million. I don't know if that's still true, but his point was, if you make the film for a lot less, then $30 million is great. He didn't need $100 million. He just needed to make back what he put into it. He also began to do live Q&As after the screenings, because he was developing a real fan base. He opened his own comic book store in New Jersey, where he was from. And his little Q&As after the movies became immensely popular, and he's just a great entertaining talker. So he then began to do just road shows in which he would talk to the audience and do Q&As, but then he started to do essentially stand-up monologue performances, which are often recorded and you can see them. And eventually he moved into podcasts, which he does. I don't even know how many podcasts he does. He does like 12 podcasts. And he's fascinating. One of the more interesting things he did is a movie called Red State, in which he brought it to Sundance. It was a political, religious horror thriller, very talky, very provocative. It did quite well at Sundance. It got a lot of interest. He then prepared an auction for buyers. He wanted all the companies to come and bid for it. At the auction at Sundance, he then said, you know what? I'm not going to sell it to any one of you. I'm going to distribute it myself. Which is very much like Cassavetes, who took Woman Under the Influence and distributed himself. This is a fascinating attitude for someone the door was open. He could have gone mainstream again. He continues to go off on his own little way. A lot of his movies are sequels, which follow his characters. It's an acquired taste. All of these filmmakers are an acquired taste, but they are fascinating. And the most fascinating thing is the interviews they have done, and they have done many, about their process, about their attitude. These are the most inspiring filmmakers when you listen to them talk about how they do it and what they care about. Edward Burns, about the same time that Kevin Smith was going to Sundance, desperately wanted to become what he called the Irish Catholic Woody Allen, the Long Island Woody Allen. He had a very specific, talky, simple film style, relationship-based storytelling that he wanted to do. He managed to film one on video while he was working for various TV shows as a tech person. He famously finished one of this movie, The Brothers McMullen. Here, I'll show you the picture there of that. That's the DVD case, the poster. And he actually managed. He was working for Entertainment Tonight, I believe, as a camera crew person. And they were doing an interview with Robert Redford, press junket kind of thing, and he handed Redford his videotape, and said, I know you own Sundance. This is my little indie film. And Redford passed it on to someone at Sundance who watched it and said, this is good. And he got into Sundance, blew up, big hit. Um, he became a Hollywood actor. He was in Saving Private Ryan, is where you might know him from. He built up through several films, making Hollywood indies, small but professionally produced within the system Hollywood indies. And he did about 5 of those. And then he said, you know what? The new forms of distribution are happening, new forms of filmmaking are happening. And he's moved away from Hollywood to produce, direct, distribute his own films his own way. He's still gone back and forth between, he did a TV series, but then he keeps on going back to his own little DIY style movies. The one that really knocked me out was one that he personally hates. He said in interviews he doesn't think it works. It's called Looking for Kitty, and it's uneven. It's messy. It's shot on video, very early shot on video. But it's really nice. It's really cool. And it's really got this DIY aesthetic. One of the characters is a private eye, Edward Burns' character. His understanding of private eyes is definitely not realistic. But the heart of the movie, the feelings of the movie, are beautiful. I think I really like that movie. This movie is not available for streaming, but you can get the DVD. It's on Amazon. And anyway, I found he did a bunch of podcast interviews on a show called The Q&A, which I like very much, with Jeff Goldsmith. I've put the link once again in the description. Not the link, the name. You can search it. 2 of his 3 long Q&A sessions with Jeff Goldsmith, Edward Burns and Jeff Goldsmith, are listed down there. I think they're really worth listening to. His approach, his attitude, it's really cool. He then wrote a book called Independent Ed. Hold on, let me see. I think I got that too. Yeah, Independent Ed. He wrote a book about his career and his attitude, which I quite like. It's a nice book. The main thing that you should know about all of these people is they were constantly changing. They constantly changed their plans, their goals, even their style. They tried different things, especially different ways of producing and distributing to keep outside of the restrictions of the business. The expectations of the business were going against their own needs and instincts. And they said, I'm going to DIY this. I'm going to keep DIYing even when they were in the business, when they were in the big time. I find that really, really important to remember because, first of all, the business is always changing. So therefore, they were finding themselves in changing times and they were like, how am I going to deal with this? But also, we are always changing. The artist is always changing. The audience is always changing. And so therefore, it makes sense to keep trying new things, new ways. The other thing that I think they all discovered was even when you're a winner, even when you get into the big time, the mainstream, it's frustrating. And if you are an experimental, personal, offbeat artist, even when you are a winner, you are frustrated by trying to convince people to let you do the things the way you do them, knowing full well that most people aren't going to like it. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And that's what I find so cool about these filmmakers, even though truly most of you will hate their movies. But I really urge you to watch them because that attitude creeps through and it should unlock something in your mind if you are at all interested in independent film. Interesting, all of these were performers. Every single one of them acted in their own movies, very often acted as other people. Almost all of them had to become essentially their own producers, even though they worked with producers. They had to understand production. They're all white men. What are you going to do? At the time, it was a white man's game. But since then, the doors have opened. I'll talk a little bit more later about some new, really interesting DIY or indie filmmakers. But I just want to sort of codify what I think this attitude is. Um, the first thing I would say is they all believe in doing what you can with what you have. If all you have is video, if all you have is friends of yours to be actors, if all you have is a video, a convenience store, that's all right. And it's okay to be messy or to fail, to not be up there competing with Marvel and Warner Brothers. You can make creative screen work that is messy and personal. The other thing that I think that they do is they all try to capture something that they consider real. It might not be your reality, but it is a reality that they felt was not being shown. A style, an attitude, a type of person. They were among the first to say, film does not have to stick to whatever the commercial industry is saying is, quote, average, normal, right. There's all sorts of different attitudes and feelings. These filmmakers all tried to do something that they believed in. You might not believe in it. It might not have won the world over, but it's something that no one else seemed to be doing, that they felt this is something I can offer. And the other thing is, they discovered that if you get lucky, even though your way will not pay as well or be as well regarded as going mainstream, you should keep being you and doing what you believe in. That is the point. So I just want to talk about a couple of filmmakers that are more recent in the past few years. There's a movie called I Like Movies. It just, I believe it just went on Netflix. I can't remember. It just showed up somewhere. It's been around for a year or two, but it was Canadian and there were some rights issues and they couldn't get it distributed in the US. It's a sweet, wonderful, dark, great little indie film. I strongly, strongly recommend it. It's called I Like Movies. Writer-director Chandler Levac. She's great. I can't wait to see what else she does. And the guy who plays the lead is amazing. It's a really, really cool little movie. There's a movie by a guy named Cooper Raiff, who has since got a good deal with Apple and made a bigger scale thing. But it's called Shithouse, which refers not to a bathroom, but to a fraternity house on a college campus. And it takes place in one night. The movie Shithouse by Cooper Raiff, I thought was really, really good. Really, really powerful stuff. Very much indie style, but good-hearted. It's a movie from a little further back called Thunder Road, another DIY, but quite well-made movie about a policeman having a nervous breakdown in a small town. It's funny, it's sad, it's quite something. Thunder Road, and then a movie called We're All Going to the World's Fair by Jane Schoenbrunn. Jane Schoenbrunn has since made I Saw the TV Glow, which is currently on Max streaming. It was slightly bigger, had some more names, had some more budget. But We're All Going to the World's Fair is very, very DIY. Very powerful, very weird, takes some work. But when you get to the end, it's a very, very strong, powerful story about loneliness and connection. It's beautiful. It's great. Anyway, point is, yes, there are lots of cool indies out there. These people that I'm talking about, what I mainly find interesting about them is how you can look back, because their careers now have been going on many of them are on their way out or dead. You can look back at the path of someone who got the indie breakthrough and decided not to take it. And that's really what I thought was really fascinating, to see the commitment to doing your own work your own way. Okay, I'm going to talk now. I'm going to move on to the comments and questions. By the way, the things I mentioned, the books, the movies, the podcasts are all listed in the description of this video. So there's not links, but you can look them up. You know how to use the internet. All right. Fung says, sounds like when I was watching the new movie Rumors. Interesting concept, but I ended up suffering the entire film. Yeah, that happens a lot. I haven't seen Rumors, but there is no guaranteeing that you are going to like everything that's you see. And what's more, no guaranteeing that you're going to like everything that's good. You may say, this is good. I didn't enjoy it, but I can take from it something that is powerful for me as a tool, as a filmmaker. Michael is talking about American neorealists, is talking about Cassavetes, absolutely. Hello, Pelicans. Watson says, was my movie Like, Share, Follow an indie? Yes, it was. That was a corporate indie in the sense that it was financed for $900,000 by Blumhouse, the horror movie company. Before that, I made a movie called Disfigured, which is rentable. I think it's not on iTunes right now, but it is on Amazon. That was a true DIY. I put up all the money myself, and I filmed it in a few weeks with a 6-person crew. That's my real most DIY. Okay. Hey, Glenn, is Edward Burns the American's very own Roberto Rossellini? Yes, in a sense. All of these artists were partly powered by, inspired by the offbeat independent filmmaking, especially in Italy and France in the 1950s and 60s. That's a whole other subject about the history of filmmaking and independent film. But the answer is yes. The first waves of what you would call independent filmmaking were not in America, unless you go back to the silent era. They were outside, the Italian neorealists, the French New Wave, some British films, the British working class films of the 60s, the Angry Young Men films. All sorts of films were made that inspired these American independents. Michael Tanaka is saying, and this is absolutely true, Wayne Wang, in that same generation in the 80s, actually he was slightly before Burns and Smith, shot a 16mm black and white film called Chan is Missing, which led to bigger things, including one of my favorite indies. It's actually two of my favorite indies, Smoke and Blue in the Face. Smoke is a little indie written by a novelist named Paul Auster, set in Brooklyn. It's a sweet little indie film, but what happened was they had a couple of days left over. They shot faster than they expected, and so they improvised a little indie movie called Blue in the Face with whoever happened to be on set, including people who were just walking by visiting, the people that they knew, like Lou Reed, Madonna. They all came in and they did these little monologues, and Blue in the Face is just a bizarre little movie that's worth checking out if you're into indie films. But Wayne Wang did that. He also did a movie called Slam Dance, which is an American indie, which I absolutely love. Okay. Greetings and good morning to Lake Filter. Working session, good. Keep writing. Everybody keep writing. Kirby Light says, in my experience, what does it mean when someone says your characters are one-dimensional, and how might you fix that problem? For me, everyone has a different definition of this, but my understanding of that usually means, honestly, two possibilities. One is they seem cliched. In other words, they seem obvious, and there's simply one quality that they have, which is really all that is going on with them. My solution to one-dimensionality, my solution, which I would urge you to watch this video, which is called Character. I did a video called Character, and in it I talk about the idea that what gives a character depth, what gives it more than one dimension, is having more than one thing going on at a time. For example, if you have a character who's a banker, he doesn't only care about banking. He might also be a compulsive gambler, or love sailing, or have a history of mental illness. Whatever it is, as soon as you give a character more than one quality, more than one thing going on in their life, they start to develop extra dimensions. So that my answer is, if your character is totally focused on their plot value, if they're totally focused on the story, they're probably going to seem one-dimensional. Think about what else is going on. Is it a hitman who is also a vegetarian? You know what I'm saying? That's, or a character, or characters who have an interest in something, or relationships with others that bring something other than their plot value. That's the key to dimension. Kevin Smith was on the Netflix series That 90s Show. Yeah, I love Kevin Smith. I really do. I actually really like, even though I have a really hard time watching Cassavetes films, and Ed Burns is often feel frustrating, but at the same time, there's something magical for me about all of these filmmakers, that keeps me, even if I only watch like a half hour at a time. But anyway, yeah, Kevin Smith is very entertaining. Hi, Butte. Good to see you. You are the screenwriting teacher version of Kevin Smith. Yeah, I think I kind of am. That would not bother me at all. Read Russ Meyer's exploitation films shot on Super 8 and blown up to 60. Yeah, I'm going to do a separate talk sometime on what I'm going to call the bad auteurs. There's a lot of exploitation and indie filmmakers who make just junk. like they're determined to make junk, but they are also in many ways exemplars of the auteur, this DIY outsider attitude. Russ Meyer was one. The guy who did Trauma, whose name I'm forgetting at the moment. Anyway, but I'll do that another time. Yes, Russ Meyer is in fact an auteur. He's also a crazy sexploitation filmmaker of the 60s. Do you think Christopher Nolan has a similar approach, but somehow just got lucky and had big budget on every film? His new film. Yes, actually, Christopher Nolan started out the same way as these people I'm talking about. He made a film called Following, which he shot very DIY. He had to shoot on weekends. Often, like, he would do like one weekend and then take a couple of weeks off until he could get everyone back together and then shoot another weekend. So yes, he comes from an indie. He's actually done a fascinating thing by managing to build an indie career within the mainstream. I would also say Spike Lee did the same. There are many, Robert Rodriguez, Steven Soderbergh. There are filmmakers who took their indie attitude and managed, because of having had some success, to build an indie attitude within the mainstream. That is a whole other subject. It's a beautiful one. I'm so thrilled. Yeah, I think anyone who looks at Tenet and Oppenheimer will say that Christopher Nolan definitely has taken an attitude, an indie attitude, when he makes his films. Sealy Jack says, do you think producing an indie and trying to go to film festivals like Sundance is the best way to enter the industry as a screenwriter? That's a fascinating question. I would say that the amount of work it takes to make an indie film, if all you want to be is a screenwriter, it's not a great way to do it. It's better to find someone who will make an indie from your script. But the amount of effort, it is so hard to make a movie, okay? It is incredibly demanding and overwhelming and requires all these different skills which a writer may not have. The visual skills, the production skills, the directing actors skills. There are so many things that go into making a film. So I would say I'm talking about people who want to be filmmakers. The question is, producing an indie and going to a festival, is it the best way to enter the industry as a screenwriter? No. The best way to enter as a screenwriter is keep writing scripts, trying to get them to other indie filmmakers who will make them. That's a good way to do it. If you want to be a filmmaker, if you want to make indie films, or if you want to be a filmmaker, making your own film is absolutely the best way. I'm making a lot of them. One of the things that's important to remember is these stories that I'm talking about, Cassavetes, Smith, and Burns, are not good examples of how hard it is to keep working, and how hard it is to break through. They were all early on in the indie business. Now, as you will notice, the people I talked to, Jim Cummings, who did Thunder Road, that was like 5 years ago. Most of them have a hard time making another film. It's hard to get support for something that is not going to make the big money. But what happened was, with the early indies, they got picked up into what was at the time the indie business. There was, for a while, a genre called independent film. It became a very popular genre in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. It's now not that good a way to make money, and the business has changed that the money you can make from indie isn't big enough. But it's still the best. If you want to make films, my message is making them however you can is absolutely the best thing to do, whether or not you break through. Donna says, awesome. Our upcoming Legion M film, Fade to Black, is a dark comedic thriller on Hollywood's obsession with needing IP to get a script solved and made. Congratulations. She just wrapped filming on it in Australia. That is bravo, marvelous. That is great. Blaine says, with streamers and social media grabbing for everyone's attention, I find it's much harder and at the same time much easier to distribute your own movies. Exactly right, Blaine. Yes, here's the deal. It is now more possible than ever, easier in a sense than ever, to make and distribute your own films. It is less likely that you will make money at it. Be prepared to lose every cent when you go into this field. And it is harder to gain attention. It is harder to gain attention for everyone. There is simply too much product, too many things, including films, TV series, podcasts, video games, all sorts of websites. There's so much coming at everyone 24/7 that it has become harder to capture an audience's attention. That's okay. Just do what all these filmmakers did, which is make your film in such a way that the time and money that you must put into it in order to get that easier distribution DIY, you don't mind losing because you got the thing done. That's, if you were in a band, you wouldn't mind the time and money it took to play gigs where you didn't make any money because you wanted to play the gig. That is how you have to look at indie film now. But it is indeed absolutely the easiest time you can make a film and produce and distribute it online in many, many fashions. You are unlikely to get a hit out of it. Sean Baker, another, absolutely. Sean Baker started with Tangerine, which was a ultra low budget DIY film shot on a phone. That got a lot of attention, partly because it was shot on a phone, also because it was good, and because it was about subjects that were not being taken seriously in the industry. It was about trans sex workers in LA. Sean Baker then moved up the indie ladder. As I've said, there is an indie mainstream path, and Sean Baker took that to his latest film, Anora. I highly recommend. It's fabulous. It does maintain that indie attitude, but it is a mainstream indie film. Absolutely great. Anora is terrific. Hello, Wolf Powers. Sean Baker's Takeout. I've never seen Takeout. Interesting. Cool. Glenn Fung says, last night was strange. I was watching the Japanese movie from 1956, I Will Buy You. Then after a while, I was thinking, isn't this the plot of Jerry Maguire? I don't know that film, so I cannot give an opinion on that, but how cool. That sounds great. I'm very curious about the 1956, I Will Buy You. Okay, Michael Lightfoot. Did you see Sean Baker's Anora? I did. It is amazing. I love it to death. I'm scratching my head as to if it is a tragedy or a comedy. The final scene is an emotional breakthrough or perhaps a tragic end. Thoughts? Without giving out too much, I would say exactly right. It is both a comedy and a tragedy, or a drama. It's not a tragedy. It is a drama, and yet it is so damn funny, and it is so heartbreaking, and it is so smart and casual and funny, and it's a terrific movie. I urge you all to see it. Anora, Anora. It's in theaters currently. It is going to be streaming soon. Um, can you do more similar live streams? Best live stream of yours so far. Thank you, Silly Jack. The answer is yes, but the problem is this takes me more effort than I actually have room for in my life right now. In other words, this takes me a couple days to prepare my thoughts and to pull the graphics and to get the links and all that stuff. So the answer is I do intend to do more of these. I like doing them. They're just more work. I'm trying to do my own work at the same time, trying to write a novel, and it's just hard to take a day or two off. But to the extent that I can, and this one is encouraging me because if I was really going crazy, I would have tried to find clips, I would have put links, I would have done all this stuff. But instead, I'm just sort of talking. And so, yes, I will hopefully do more just like this. Have you watched the Irish new small budget film, Small Things Like These? It's so great, and somehow Cillian Murphy stars in a low budget. My guess is that that's not that low budget. My guess is that's simply produced out in the British film industry, which has a path for filmmaking that is not hyper competitive with Hollywood. But yes, I have not seen Small Things Like These yet. However, I have seen the Irish film. There's an Irish film called Kneecap. Kneecap. It's here. Let me. All right, let's see. Kneecap. There is an Irish film called Kneecap. Oopsie. Anyway, I would strongly recommend it. It's about a Irish language Gaelic rap trio starring. It's sort of like The Hard Day's Night. It's a rock and roll musical about a band, about how a band came to be, starring the members of an actual band, and it's a mix of legend and truth. It's got an amazing style. The music is phenomenal. It's called Kneecap. It's about this Irish rap group, and it's phenomenal. I love it. Anyway, hello, Adam Lum. Sorry to be joining so late. Happy Christmas seasons greetings. Thank you, and to all of you. I'll do more of that next week. Bearded Screenwriter says, thank you so much, Glenn. Your insight and info is so valued every time. Thank you. That is lovely. Yeah, I'm going to start to wind down now. I just want to, again, emphasize the point of this is to steer you to check out the work of these three filmmakers, John Cassavetes, Kevin Smith, and Edward Burns, none of whom you are likely to enjoy. Their work is hard to take. It is personal. It is, and I don't mean personal. I mean personal is that their attitudes and style and what they think is funny or what they think is interesting or what they think is a good scene are aggressively independent. They are just doing things the way they think they should be done. And that's my point. That is my message. I urge you to check the indie filmmakers with an outsider attitude. They are making very little effort to be commercial or popular or acceptable in any way. And I just want to talk again about the attitude, which is basically do what you can with what you have. If all you have is a crappy camera and all you have is the location that you can borrow and all you have is some actors who aren't really great but have good spirit, use it. Do it. That's absolutely the point. Then try to capture something real or true to you. Now, that may be a private eye movie, whatever it is. It could be a fantasy, sci-fi, whatever feels like it's something true that you believe in that you feel like no one else is doing. That is the key. Something, if you're doing something that you saw in a big Hollywood movie, no one is going to want to see your version of it compared to theirs unless you're bringing something different, something new, something intriguing, possibly offensive, possibly annoying, but new, yours. And if you get lucky, even though it will not pay as well or be as well regarded as going commercially mainstream, keep being you and doing what you believe in. That is the lesson of these three particular filmmakers that I was trying to bring to you. They are absolutely not going to be your favorite filmmakers, likely. Like I said, I can't even watch a Cassavetes film all the way through. I find it extremely difficult, but I'll watch half an hour here and there, and I will be knocked out by the cinematic energy that's being brought there. And I keep thinking, what would I do with that? And that's the message for all of you, is if you are looking at something saying, I want to do what they did, there's no reason for you to exist. They already did it. What Kevin Smith did was he saw what Richard Linklater did. He said, I want to do what I would do with this approach. That's the game. The game is to do something yours, something that you feel hasn't been done. Not for the purpose of just being different, for the purpose of expressing something that seems real to you. Even if it's real silliness, even if it's real romance, whatever it is, just make it something that you feel like, you know what? Nobody's doing this. Talking about a community that is underrepresented, talking about a style or an attitude that is underrepresented, not seen, something about senior citizens, something about moms, something about all these things that frankly don't take up enough room in the movies. Okay. A couple of farewells. Always lovely to be present in your live streams. May happiness and health be with you always. Thank you, Lake Filter. I appreciate it. D-G says, great topic. Thanks for the stream. You are extremely welcome. I am so glad that you are here. A student I saw a few times directed The House of Yes. Oh yeah, that's way back in the day. Cool. Libby Watson says, Smith and Burns are very 90s, which is true. But with that lens, the films can be fun. Thanks for your... Yeah, completely. There is nothing going on. Yeah, no, John Cassavetes, his views on men and women and life are shockingly 1950s and 60s. They are painful sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. Attitudes. I am not endorsing anything in any of these films. Okay. Butte says, I watched Cassavetes' Murder of a Chinese Bookie after you talked about him, and it was okay. Thanks. Thank you. Oh, Cassavetes actually acted in a movie that was very inspired by Cassavetes, but I feel is much better than his films within his style, called Mikey and Nicky. Don't have the graphics here or anything, but Mikey and Nicky is written and directed by Elaine May. So a really cool character study about these two guys, one of whom has crossed the mob and is afraid of being murdered. It's a nicely done film. Okay. I wrote a screenplay without any care for the budget, which seemed foolish, but it is getting read by more producers than my sensible stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Certainly if you're a screenwriter and you're not planning to make it yourself and you're not worried about who's going to make it, sure, do whatever your vision says. I'm talking about DIY indie filmmaking, low budget filmmaking. You obviously want to write towards your budget. But if your vision is something that's expensive but fun or cool or powerful, write it up. Never hesitate to write your vision. And with that, thank you. Feng says, Happy Christmas, indeed. Well, I'll be back next week before Christmas, so we'll talk about that then. In the meantime, I just urge you all to check out the possibilities and the attitudes, the many attitudes that one can have in this very, very commercialized world. It's nice to see people who are being unique artists. Michael Lightfoot says, thanks, Glenn. I look forward to hopefully catching you chatting about tragedy sometime. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's going to be a while, probably after New Year's. Could you just say what time you generally start these live streams? I caught this by chance. I can say absolutely. My live streams are every Wednesday, if I can make it, which is most times, at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Zone, the time zone of California and Washington and Oregon in the United States. 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Pacific Standard Time. That is when I do these things. So I hope you will all explore, experiment, just open up your minds. The main thing is I hope you will go write something.